Ms. Nichols. Hi, Lou. Mr. Talbot.
Sylvia.
Okay.
You have a quorum.
To dispense with the pledge to the flag this afternoon, since this is a small group. And I think we should move right to the project at hand, which is all of that wonderful information you've given us about the changes on the job descriptions that we need to take a look at. And I don't know, Peter and Don, if you've had a chance to look at them. I did look at them briefly this afternoon, but I think, Sean, we'll leave it to you to introduce them and explain.
Okay, can you hear me all right? First of all, I feel like my microphone was quiet. Is everyone all right now?
You're good.
Okay.
Different.
Yep, you're good.
You're a little quiet, Sean. Just
That was
Sounds
happening
different.
yesterday, and I don't know why. If
yeah.
I'm too quiet, I can patch in with my phone if you give me a minute. Is it?
It's okay. I
No,
think we
you're
can hear you.
audible, it's just not the same.
Hold on. Wait, let me try one thing before I do it. Let me try. All right. Can you hear anything now?
Yeah, that's good for
That's
me.
better.
Is that better?
Hi, George.
Yes.
So, all right. Well, so thank you, Sylvia. And yeah, so if we're starting with job descriptions, I will. Why don't I think for ease, we'll start with the capital projects manager position.
Okay,
George Malotny here, and that way I can cut them loose after we're done with the discussion. I think if you'll look in your packet, it is also should be the first one, I think, in your packet.
Yep.
We have, as you'll recall, in the budget, we discussed upgrades, or really, yeah, an upgrade and a change of responsibilities for a position formerly called assistant town engineer. This would be the capital projects manager position, a little more of a hybrid position. And again, I'll let George kind of walk through the explanation. We did discuss it during the budget and approved in terms of the funding in the budget, just as a reminder for everyone. So this would be formalizing that effort. So George, do you want to start on that for me?
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody.
there.
Thanks. This, as Sean said, this is a position, it's a promotion within the department, essentially. We're taking the person who is the assistant town engineer and trying to, the intent was to create a capital projects manager standalone position, but it was somewhat tied to the full-time town engineer being hired. The council obviously decided to go with a consulting engineer for the time being. And so this position became more of a little bit of a hybrid where the person's going to have to do capital projects management as well as some engineering duties, just because we have to have a certain amount of hours in engineering to get those things done. But it's as I said, a person who's on staff. They have a lot of skills in capital project management type activities, as well as being the assistant town engineer currently, so that they are well able to do both functions. And the hope is, I think, that depending on obviously the council's choice in the future, if a full-time town engineer does become a reality, that they will swing into the capital projects management full-time to the degree that that's a possibility. But the functions, I know you've got all the paperwork here, and I won't read them in detail because I know you all can read, and I'll leave it up to questions. But basically, we have many capital projects to manage in the public works arena, and as it turns out, this position is funded half-time by the Board of Ed. So the capital projects management part of it will be split between the town side and the Board of Ed side. So the way I like to look at it is the 27 projects that were formerly on the PBC agenda that were pared down, thank you very much to the council, haven't gone away. They're still out there. They need to be done. So now many of them either have to be done by Rich Clavette on the Board of Ed side or by Public Works on the town side. and this person's going to be heavily involved with getting a number of those accomplished and constructed or what have you. So that's the genesis of the position. There's many projects out there. There's more than 27, honestly, but those were just the ones that were assigned to the PBC. So the basics of it is that they'll be the point for the town and hire consultants as we need, or do RFPs or do bids or whatever the service we need to get these projects done, and stay on top of it, and obviously brief, whether it's me or Sean or the council or whoever we need to brief periodically. We'll have that capability, and one point person to do it. So that's the bulk of it. The description in the job description is pretty generic, as they generally are, but this person kind of has to be fluid and do many things, from managing capital projects to, on the engineering side, being involved with paving, our paving system, which is a capital project. It's a large capital project, involved with GIS and some of the other specialty engineering functions that he already is involved with in his current position. So in general, that's it. It gives this person, like I say, a little more flexibility to do some more functions for the department and for the town in general, I would say. And it kind of gives me somebody I can lean on to make sure these projects are getting done, and I don't necessarily have to have my hand in each one of them to a high level of detail. So with that, I'll leave it up to your questions or anything I can answer.
Don or Peter, questions before I weigh in?
I don't have any right now. Thank you.
George, who is currently in the role that you're going to transition this into?
The assistant town engineer is Dan Bombero, who that's the person who's going to take this position.
And that's a full-time or a part-time?
Full-time assistant town engineer right now.
And what's the Lou, what's the level? Is that an E2 now?
Now it's
think
an
he's-
E1.
E1, yeah.
Okay.
Don's in the operations manager engineering.
And how is this going to work? You mentioned that this will take stuff off the plate of Rich Clavette, because now those capital projects are being managed by this individual instead of Rich. And I don't know whether this is probably not a George question then, but do we know how that's going to affect Rich, or what the Board of Ed is going to do with they're just taking it off his plate and that's great. He, doesn't have to worry about this stuff anymore, or?
We've had meetings with Rich to discuss some of this, and so Rich, much like myself, I would say on the town side, will be still involved with all these projects, because we'll still have to approve funding and different things and be involved in bidding and all that. So this person is more the person who can do the detail work, I'm going to say. So, write an RFP, write a bid, evaluate the bids that we receive, go out to the projects, walk around, make sure things are being done to the standard we need. It won't absolve Rich or I from doing our job, which is also some of that, but it gives us the flexibility to do some of the bigger picture things that we can when we're trying to write a bid for a boiler replacement or something of that nature that is fairly detailed. But Rich has a number of projects on his side that are funded and have not started per se. So this is the perfect time as we go into the winter to get a lot of these projects shovel ready, as we all say, and get them ready to go for the spring or whatever we need to do.
Is this individual then going to become the liaison to PBC? Do you see that transitioning, or?
My intention is to stay with the PBC. I enjoy that group, so I plan to stay as the liaison, but certainly he'll be involved in some of the PBC projects and either be briefing me for the PBC meetings or may attend a few on his own just to kind of get a feel for the PBC and then get his face out there.
Okay.
To follow up on, I'm sorry, Peter, are you finished?
Yep, I'm
Yeah.
good, Sylvia.
To
Thank
follow up on your question about Rich, this becomes giving you more of an assistant in your department. Does Rich not have any assistant to do a similar job within the Board of Ed hierarchy?
My knowledge is that that's correct. Rich doesn't have, there's Rich and then there's the maintenance staff, I'm going to
Right.
say. So I don't believe there's another person to take this duty on over there if Rich doesn't do it.
So the intent of this is to make his job easier to manage, perhaps. Give him a little more backup in managing all the projects that come across his desk. But how will it affect or be affected by any of the school building projects, the modernization things? I know we discussed having project managers for any significant building projects or rebuilding projects, and we discussed that at the SMC committee. How does this affect that? Will this person have any input into any of that? Sure.
To the extent that that we want a town person to be the point person, yes, that certainly. They obviously can't bid out an entire school project or something. That would never be
Right.
something we do in house. But like you said, that the town is contracted with an owner's rep firm to kind of handle that work. But certainly in almost every large scale school modernization project or any municipal project that I've seen, there's always a point person for the town that's involved to be the bridge, if you will, between all the consultants and the contractors, and then whether it's the Board of Ed or the PPC or the council or whatever entity needs to be involved. There's usually an in-house person for the town that has solely the town's best interests involved and is paid by the town for that, as opposed to consultants who I won't run down, but when you're paid directly by the town and that's your livelihood, the understanding is that you're going to look out for the town's interests in all cases, and you're always going to take the town's side in any matter, unlike a firm that may have its own interests at heart as opposed to that.
So this person would be that person and not you or Rich?
It certainly could be that person, but it could be myself or Rich. When the time comes, I guess the short answer is when the time comes, we would sort it out. But
Okay.
I would not mind being.
Yeah. Oh, if I could just add, yeah, Sylvia, you're correct that when we were envisioning this position, and if you'll recall last year, responding to the 30 plus projects that were in front of the PBC specifically, the bulk of which were school projects, and again, really indicative of, as we've discussed many times, the town at something of a crossroads with respect to school modernization. What's going to come out of that committee as a plan, and ultimately the town council's plan, is certainly going to inform the workload and the sort of the segregation of duties with respect to the existing maintenance projects, or perhaps a full scale. If there was a new construction project, there's still going to be and there's going to be years of the types of projects that we have been approving and working through. And I think whether that person's the point person or they pick up all of the other work while somebody like Rich or George or Vin or anyone else is a point person for a larger scale project, I think that this will certainly give us that flexibility and ability to continue to not miss any lose any ground with our other projects that we have. But a lot of the reason in sharing the cost with the Board of Ed, as I proposed, was as we all know through the capital projects, capital budget process, in a normal year, this year was the abnormal year. In most years, they're requesting 12 to 15 capital projects over the last few years. And when those were all going to the PBC, that meant they were all being managed by the town. But either way, the work is there. Whether they stay within Board of Ed, that's the justification for having this person at Rich's side to help with those school, window replacements or the HVAC replacements or the sidewalk improvements or all the things we've seen come through on the school side as well. So the need is there, kind of whether it's under, this is nice for us because we get to keep the person, under the town, I guess, primary control, if you will, but I want to try to open the door for more of these sort of sharing relationships as we evolve as a town going forward, because there's a lot of areas where I think we can collaborate, and it starts with staff, between the Board of Ed and town, and share resources like this. So I think it's a good model for that.
Okay. And that makes perfect sense. My other question is, Dan has current job duties, and if he's absorbing all of these, how does that affect what he's doing now? This seems like quite a complicated process to take
Sure.
these duties, right?
Sure.
Is that going to sacrifice his help in other areas?
It's not the ideal situation that we envisioned, but I think right now it's doable because we have a consulting town engineer. That's going to allow Don Nolte, who is our engineering operations manager, to shed many of the plan reviews to the consulting town engineer, which would be whether it's a in-house town engineer or consultant. So that would be the review process. Don will free up to do more of the engineering project management, if you will, and kind of making sure the specific engineering projects are able to be tackled and are moving forward, along with the engineering technician who works with them. Dan will still, as I said, have his hand in it to some degree. Dan has a real affinity for and skill in our pavement management system database and picking out the roads that we use that we pave and the different treatments. He's really taken to that. So that's not a full-time job in itself, but it's a very specialized piece that we'd like to keep him involved in. So that's where he kind of dovetails with engineering and some of the other GIS things that he's got skills with. But my hope is that the bulk of his time will be in this capital project management side, where he has many skills as well, and we can use them. So the short answer is, as I said earlier, it's not ideal. If we get the lineup of people in the future with some in-house folks, it will be the ideal situation. But right now, we'll make it work the way it is, and it's certainly better than what we had before. I can guarantee you that.
I'm glad you're looking to what will work now, but also keeping an eye on what is working ahead, because I fear sometimes if we focus too much on the people who are currently in the job and saying, yes, well, we'll design it because Dan can do the road management, the other thing, we want to design the job so that it is not designed to a specific individual that we have currently employed, because that could change over the years. And so,
Sure, absolutely.
yeah, so that's good. And then just refresh my memory, this has been budgeted in this year's budget.
Yes.
Correct? Right.
Yep. Half
Okay.
and half. Half
And
Board
on
of
the
Ed,
school
half
Have
half.
to have to, yeah, okay. Don?
Yeah, sorry, I just had a quick question. I assume because it's been budgeted in, we're not eliminating any other positions. This is just an addition, correct?
Correct. We eliminated the in-house town engineer position, so we're using
Right,
a consultant, but that's.
But
Well-
other than
well,
that, then this is just an additional role, right?
Well,
cor-
just to clarify, the assistant town engineer position though would not
Well, that's true, yeah.
be replaced. So
So we won't have that position. Okay.
in a way,
So actually, we're not really going to add any people. It's just moving people. One other question. I know we're splitting this with the Board of Ed. Is that correct?
correct.
This position?
Yes,
Now, is it a 50-50?
it's budgeted 50-50, but with Dan's engineering duties, it's not gonna, I think the Board of Ed or the Board of Ed staff is aware that it's not quite a 50-50 split. So the town's gonna need him for some assistant town engineering duties at times. So it might be a 40, 20, 40 or something, however that works out. The town may get 60% and the Board of Ed may get 40 or something like that,
But
but
the
we
money
won't
will
tell them.
be, but the money will be a 50-50 split.
For this, yeah,
Correct.
this year, that's how we budgeted, and I proposed it. I think what George is referencing, and just for anyone else, watching from home, we also proposed a full-time town engineer position at the same time. So what we've had to re-engineer, and part of what took a couple months here to kind of sort out after the first of the year is, we now know what we're going to have for a consulting firm, consulting town engineer, and then what duties might Dan still need to do that wouldn't have had to do if we had approved. And again, COVID hit, we had to eliminate a lot of these requests. We knew Walter was retiring, so that happened, and that is was going to be what it is. But now we're in the position where we don't have a full-time town engineer, and we didn't have that with Walter, but we have a very unique situation with Walter anyway. So now this part made it through the budget, and so this slightly re-engineered, no pun intended, is now I think it's still a great workable solution for where we are. And really, it's actually works a little better in conjunction with the consulting firm that we'll be bringing on for town engineer services, which again, this will be our first year trying that. So I do think come next budget, and if we end up keeping the consulting engineer firm as a proposal again next year, and the schools want to maybe have a 60-40 split or something, we may be able to talk about that if we propose next year. But in short, the full salary, they're going to give us half of it on the salary piece.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, any other questions? So we'll go through all of these, and I don't think we need to vote to move each one of these separately to the council, do we? Or can we just go through all of them and have the committee? Yeah, okay, so let's go to the next one.
Okay. Do we need George for anything else?
I don't think any. I
And we
think
always
if
need George.
your questions are answered, then I think we're good.
All right, see you, George.
See you, George.
Thank you, George. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
All right. Would you like me to start on the next one?
I think that's, yeah, let's go to the next one. I'm on my iPad looking for the next one, so.
So up next, we have Assistant Town Manager, Public Information Officer, and followed we'll have some edits, some cleanup edits to the Administrative Assistant position within the Town Manager's office. We introduced this at our last the July Personnel Committee meeting. This is a formalizing of what I've been working toward with respect to restructuring from the management level, the leadership team, organization. I know that I shared before the organizational chart revisions that I have proposed, and that we've been frankly operating under, in effect, for the last couple of months as we've started to formalize these relationships and supervisory responsibilities for the assistant town manager position. Again, I don't know if you want me to walk through the whole job description, but in short, this now shifts a significant amount of direct supervisory experience to the assistant town manager PIO position, with specifically the operations, first point of contact for the operations of the library, planning, economic development, building department, and human services department, and also the point of contact supervisor, if you will, of the elected positions of town clerk and the elected offices, specifically the staff of the town clerk and registrar of voters. Obviously, we don't supervise per se the elected officials, but their staff are town employees as well, appointed town employees. So they will be, those departments as well will be the primary contact for the assistant town manager position as well. So
So there don't seem to be changes other from the initial discussions that we had when this came
No,
up.
no, it's formalizing everything we kind of discussed before. And, again, as you always do, cleaning up a little bit, just kind of, the way things actually work versus the way they're written in the job description. But everything is largely the same. And I think, again, it gets us on a good path going forward. And so I'd ask for your consideration.
Any questions, Don or Peter?
Is this, like I saw, social media and communications, does that include the website too?
It does, yes.
It should probably be added in there. I hope that someday, and I'm sure Arnett will, we get somebody who should, because it's getting bigger and bigger. We're going to need to look into getting a website, social media person at a part-time basis somewhere in the future, I think, because of the way the electronics is moving. I'm thinking that might be something in the future, but I would add website onto that as part of the duties as well, because that's no small task either, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's in the last, it's referenced in the last sentence of the position objectives, that first paragraph. It's
Right.
typical with positions like this. We almost laughed that it was fit onto 2 pages, because the essential functions, I guess the key word is essential, because there's just so many things that
Yeah.
anyone in our office, certainly Arnett is ultimately involved in or responsible for in some way. So, but absolutely. And again, the website, we just had conversations about it yesterday with respect to trying to push across the finish line the revised website, which is, again, been in almost ready to launch for months and months now, but we just can't seem to get it across. And we're trying to work with our IT team. And actually, that's probably a whole other conversation that probably will come back to personnel in the not too distant future, about how we want to evolve IT going forward too. And that might be
Because my concerns are, I mean, it's a lot of responsibilities, and trying to tackle everything on that list is not an easy task. And listen, I know Arnett works hard, but I mean, I don't know if she sleeps. I think we need to make sure that we don't overload to make sure that, and then things don't get done too. So I get, that's my only concern, but
I think it's it's a fair point for sure. I think one thing that we've talked about a lot, Arnett and I have talked about that a lot, is while certainly the public information officer piece of her position is sort of critical as a point person, we are also trying to empower our departments, and we're bringing on folks, again, empowering folks who can manage their own section of the website, do their own draft press releases that get kind of vetted and approved, but not written from scratch by this office, which has been the historical practice.
Right.
I think that certainly to some extent, the police department, library, certainly, they have their own social media folks. This position is not currently doing all of the social media for the town. There's a lot of Parks and Rec also does all their own social media, the pool. So we have kind of diversified who's actually doing that piece of it. The same is supposed to be true with the website. Again, as is all too often, and I think because Arnett has the work ethic she does kind of welcome or take things off of other people's plates. And then frankly, that even comes down to the position that we're going to talk about next with respect to the administrative support staff, that there are pieces that position can be empowered even more so to do and take on and manage, which is kind of an extension of the conversation we had last time too, even with help to emails and website and responding to constituents. So it's going to continue.
I mean,
yeah.
One of the things, I mean, someday we may need just one person to oversee all social media for all areas of this town, to make sure, even though they might be doing their own, making sure that the message is getting across the same way from all areas. And I mean, that's something in the long term, but I think that's something we may need to be looking at someday to, if the pool's putting out one and then Public Works is, Park and Rec is putting out another one, we want to make sure that the message, it's all the same message. So.
Sure. Yep.
Sean, can I just make a sidebar on this one?
Yeah, you're right.
And Don, I'm really gratified to hear you say that, because I have been advocating for an electronic media coordinator, technology coordinator for about 6 years now, I've been advocating for a position to do exactly what you're saying, because we've gotten to the point where I think we do need that. And I absolutely agree with you. And which is why I think Ryan, the number 7 was written the way it was under the job description. So we're hopeful that we're going to have some on the ground assistance with that. So thank you.
Well, I oversee 3 websites, and it's very time consuming to do, and it's not an easy job. And I think I give you a lot of credit for what you do to keep up with everything. It's just not an easy thing. I know that for a fact.
Peter, anything?
Yeah, with this position and actually with the other one, how does it work then where you have incumbents that are in a position and you're greatly changing the job description for that position? Does the incumbent automatically get it? Is it is it posted? And
So with respect to, well, frankly, with the assistant town manager position is clearly a revision to the existing job description, and the incumbent is expected to stay in that position for sure. I would say that the changes to the administrative assistant position are really more modest in substance. I think what we're doing is clarifying some of the existing responsibilities, and also making sure that the language is in there that's sort of up to date with the way the office is expected to run and work now. But the plan is not to post either of these positions. There's no change in classification to the administrative assistant position. It's really more of a clarification, not an expansion of duties.
That
Yep.
yeah, and just to speak in a general, just as a general observation, Don, I agree with you, and Arnett, you and I have spoken to as far as all the electronic stuff that you take care of. I can foresee, and as we go forward with even morphing into goals and objectives for the town manager, and that sort of, if you've had a chance to read any of the other information we have, kind of even can morph into a greater overarching scene on how the town is managed to reach certain goals, and therefore directing the job descriptions and the goals and objectives. And it starts from a higher place, and we're finding that the town is getting more and more complicated to manage. There are more and more issues that come out, many more time consuming responsibilities. So this is a good start to go there. I'm not sure that there isn't going to be a place going forward in the next few years to change these and add, like Arnett says, add another position to take care of a task that wasn't considered when I came on the council 10 years ago. We didn't have the need for all of this level of technology. So we really need to take a look at it from a bigger overarching place. But for now, this is a good start to get us in that direction, in my opinion. So does that answer everybody's questions? And are we all good with what we are at the place we are now? And the administrative assistant you alluded to is not an extremely different description of something that isn't being done already. It's just clarifying that, in my opinion, perhaps including a little bit more responsibility. Does anybody have questions? Have you had a chance to look at it and review it or not? The administrative assistant change.
I haven't had a chance to review that one.
Anything we should know differently, Sean, that would be a significant change in what is happening currently?
No, I think, again, some of it is just clean up in terms of general supervision. But I mean, further down, you'll see, and again, some of it was maybe overly specific before, like handles, was it the lobby art exhibit? I love that.
Yeah.
It was a personal favorite of mine. But later, there's taking ownership of responsibilities and accurately preparing and drafting. But some of it is just language cleanup for how our expectations are currently. And I think, but there's really, there's not a lot of, sorry, my phone's ringing. There's not a lot of substantive changes. It's sometimes reorganizing a little bit, but it's also, or just saying, coordinates and manages, or, so just kind of a little more, again, empowered to be a little more self-directed in some of the activities that they're expected to do. And I know the incumbent is more than capable of doing those things, and frankly does it in many cases. And on others, we can continue to work towards that. And so I think that it's really expectations that aren't really set in a job description, just in how we want the office to function.
I noticed when I see this written, the job classification is revised. Did we revise that prior to this? Or is this a new N2? Is that a different classification?
It looks like, I think it was reside, no, N2 is the same classification. I think it must have been last revised.
Right.
Before I
It
started.
was revised in 2016, yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, so that's the current one. So
Probably to add the lobby art.
probably. Okay, any questions on that one? Okay. Now, do we have another? Those were the ones that we were discussing, correct? Those three?
Correct, those three. Yep.
Okay, so we're good with that. So if the committee is comfortable with those revised decisions, I think we need a motion to just move these forward for council consideration.
So moved.
Peter?
Second.
Don? Okay, and all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. All right, that was good. I think those are good changes to happen. Now, Sean, when we began our committee and our council deliberation about Sean's goals and objectives, we all agreed in our conversations that there needed to be a little bit more reorganization on how we did that. And we discussed the possibility of having some sort of a workshop, whatever else you want to call it, what do we call these?
Retreat, I think was the word, or something. Yeah.
What did you say?
Storming
A
retreat.
right, to discuss that. I had a chance to review briefly. I sent Sean a comment about the 2 or 3 proposals that came to us from people that he'd reached out to for information. Don and Peter, have you had a chance to look at either of those? And did you? It concerns me, and I think we need to pursue something, but I'm going to start with my opinion here. I feel like we may be expanding the original intent of making it easier for Sean to have a daily monitoring of his goals and objectives and prioritizing them, and expanding it according to some of those documents into looking at an organization-wide organization of how the town pursues goals and objectives, both of which are important. I have a little bit of a concern about consultants in some cases over delivering things that we may have already had, and a couple of those suggested proposals, not ones that we're even investigating specifically, but the type of proposal was to provide us with a lot of demographic and environmental information, which I believe we have gathered by the School Modernization Committee, by our charter, not charter, but our plan of conservation and development. And a lot of the materials that we have are fairly current, and I'm not sure that we need to look at that. I'm not opposed to trying to look at a retreat that would make it a little easier, but I think maybe that's a farther in the future endeavor, and we might be better off to focus initially for the short term in getting Sean a little clearer direction as to the priorities of what we need to deal with on a day-to-day basis today, with the idea that we are going to, like we have just done, change the job descriptions and come up with an overarching policy. Now, I don't know if that made any sense, but I'd like to hear some comments about that. And then Sean, you can respond and tell me how you feel about all that. Any comments,
So,
Peter?
I'll say my interpretation of what you said is I think down the line that I was thinking of, that this is more of the proposals we got were more for full blown, how to run the town, so to speak.
Right.
And I'm not sure we're looking for a consultant as much as we're looking for a facilitator that can walk us through goals and objectives. I don't think we have a problem writing them. What we need is to figure out how to stick to them and how to prioritize them and how we handle this whole thing of 9 people trying to supervise one individual, and who does that individual listen to? Is it an individual voice or should it be the collective voice? So I think I don't think we need a consultant that's going to cost us a ton of money. But I think we need some sort of facilitator that walks us through based on what we want to do and keeps us on task and gets us to where we need to be at the end.
You're so much quicker with words than I am. Don, what about you?
I'm on the same page. I think, the goals and objectives, we can all throw out different goals and objectives. It's implementing them and prioritizing them, which is the biggest challenge. I think, I'm sure it's for Sean, but it's also for us trying to figure out, and if there's 9 of us, we all may have different priorities. And I think we may need somebody to guide us in telling us how we base those priorities one way or another. But I do like the idea of some kind of a retreat, whether we do it right now or down the pike. I think it's something that's important as a group to get together and to discuss this in an informal setting with a facilitator.
I agree with that. And I think that there was one statement, I don't know whether it came in your initial email, Sean, or not, or where I read it, but I think one of the places where we may look to establish some I don't think policy is the word, but procedure. We have an election every 2 years and we have new people that come onto the board, and sometimes they do not know the protocol as well. And sometimes it takes a couple of years to figure out how that happens, but to have a semi-retreat review of the way we structure our supervision of our paid employees would be helpful. Not a big consultant coming in, but a retreat, a small facilitated day, half a day even, to just get us to think about how our responsibilities as individual counselors are at directing your job, and who is our point person to help you find out what you're supposed to do and how we prioritize it. So I think we 3 all kind of are in that same place. Now, Sean, you're the one that's going to receive all of this. Where do you stand on that?
Sure. So, no, I think it's a lot of great feedback. And again, yeah, just to be clear, and I think I tried to say this, although again, I was kind of pulling some of this together more recently as I got some of these documents. But I'm talking to a number of different facilities. Yeah. What I sent from Novak is certainly what I would consider and I completely agree with what you've said. I think it's maybe I don't know how else to say it, the platinum level, if you will, or the longer term maybe goal of where we might be able to get, not necessarily even using a consultant at all times, but just sort of a way of thinking, a way of structuring how we talked about this in July. I mean, that really the fact that we traditionally, and again, it's in my contract, so it's a contractual agreement within my contract and the council that we'll do goals and objectives in June, and that we will adopt them in normal years, I guess, and then I will be evaluated on how we did against those. And I think, as we talked about in July, even the time frame of that doesn't really coincide well with a new council, say, right? Say a new council seats, or there's a couple of new members, and maybe you know, when I had a conversation with this consultant, for instance, she, you know, has done a lot of these and kind of, I think, framed things in a way that I think made a lot of sense. Sort of, how does the council want to govern for the next 2 years, right? What are your strategic priorities? Sometimes it's what you ran on, and sometimes it's what you believe, or sometimes it's what you're inheriting if you're new to the council. You know, the strategic priority, the community's core values, you know, aren't going to change year to year. But I think as a document, as an agreement that we could all kind of come to, and again, I'm not advocating we use this consultant. I'm just saying that down the line, what I liked about the idea of doing something, maybe it's every 2 years, that says, hey, let's sit in December after an election, or January, and let's really spend a day and really make sure there's no miscommunication. We're all on the same page about what we're trying to work towards. What are the big picture strategic priorities? And I think that's where we call them goals and objectives, the way we do it in the contract and annually. But I think there's a way to make it even better. And again, I'm also not trying to propose a huge project. I agree that some of the, you know, these work products included demographic information and stuff that I agree is not necessary, or maybe duplicative of what we already have in other areas. But I do think, you know, in a perfect world, as down the line, if somebody says, what are Cheshire's core values? What is Cheshire, you know, that we should be able to answer that question in a kind of succinct way, or point to a document that says, here are the 8 that the council identified, and that they're holding the manager accountable for. You know, I mean, I think that's, or that the projects or the initiatives that he's working on are aligned with those core values and those goals. So I know it's a little different, maybe it's a little broader than what we traditionally call goals and objectives, but as we talked about in July, it seems to me that annually it really has been more, there's definitely the council's goals and objectives, but they're, even the way they're proposed by the town manager. And again, this is feedback I got from Rob and others, that they didn't like the way this was sort of, that if the manager's proposing the goals and objectives and then the council sort of commenting on them and tweaking them, I don't know if we're really capturing what everybody wants, or I guess I can't guarantee we are of all 9. So I think that was what I want to get to. And I agree that I think maybe a facilitator, I'm having a conversation with another one out of Massachusetts, I think tomorrow, that is much more of a facilitator, goal setting, sometimes team building type person. But I think you can do this in a way that's not I think this comes out of like a 2-day retreat that this city does. I'm not saying we're ready for that, or do we want to move forward with that? So I think half a day or a day of a facilitated conversation around how this council wants to govern and what our core values are, I think would really be helpful as we try to identify goals and objectives.
Right, and we're gonna also be doing this halfway through an election cycle too. So,
Right.
you know, I think if we did a half day, and how I envision this is, I think exactly along the lines of what you're saying, is that the 9 of us get into a room and, you know, throw up on the spitball on the wall, you know, all of the things that we think Cheshire should be, what we want to see, what our priorities are, and then narrow those down to the top, pick a number of priorities, and those become your priorities. Economic development, I'm sure, is going to be one. Fiscal stability and responsibility is going to be another. And then, you know, the other ones are probably interchangeable depending on what's going on. But those are going to be the core. And then within those are the objectives that get you there. And that's what you're assessed on.
Right.
I agree 100%. And that also helps the departments who are in charge of economic development or planning and zoning or whatever, to have a basis of, do these fit in with our sort of core direction? And I think that's best. And I do think, I agree with Peter. My question to you, Sean, is, if we do this, how quickly is that going to affect this year's, you know, we were supposed to do in June. I've been on the council now for several terms. We never, ever got to it when it was supposed to be done. I mean, this is not unusual. So how quickly can we use this project to give you more direction? Or how long can we go before we get it accomplished?
Well, I think I should be able to have an answer in the next, hopefully week or so, as I talk to a few of them. As I said, I have one phone call tomorrow with what I think will be a more, certainly, maybe more targeted, less expansive sort of proposal. And again, this is a sample from this one. I'm sure they can modify, but they happen to be out of, I think they're from Colorado or Utah. To be honest, this year is hard. They strongly recommended that the facilitator, when they facilitate council retreats, that they do them in person. And she pointed out directly, this is hard. Connecticut's 14-day, and again, this was as of we spoke a week and a half ago. At the time, at least, there's a 14-day quarantine from any other. I think actually Colorado was technically not on the list at the moment, but you know how it's a hard world for state consultants. But on the other side, we did say we wanted someone outside of, at least out of Cheshire, someone kind of fresh look, fresh, sort of unvarnished view of us and just sort of helping facilitate. But again, it's just a hard world this year. Now, I think what we also talked about, though, was I do still think this is a year where we can target, and again, we can, I mean, the contract is what it is, but we can target December for, for a lot of reasons. Having adopted goals and objectives while I'm planning the budget for the next year is the best time to have it. I said at the July meeting, doing them in June, right after we adopted the budget, has never really kind of made, just sort of sense to me. And I think we have an opportunity here. It's September. If I could get a consultant and get on their schedule, or a facilitator, to do something in kind of the October timeframe, and then we could kind of agree on it and adopt it kind of towards, November and December. I'd have that document as I go to build a budget for fiscal 22 and say, that way I'm at budget workshops, I'm saying, well, here's this, initiative I'm looking at, or here's this reorganization I've done, or here's this, I'm doing this because 2 months ago you said you wanted to do it. I mean, that's really the way this
Right.
I can and should work.
Right, as a direct result of input, yeah.
Right. Not every time is it going to be a direct line like that, but I think it would certainly, you'd be building a budget with a little more kind of
Credibility.
guidance and confidence that it's in keeping with what the council's looking to do, so that there's less surprises too.
So I can't believe that there aren't facilitators that aren't in the Eastern Corridor here that would be willing to come.
There are, there certainly are. This was one of the first I talked to. They're very
Right.
well known and they have a great reputation. But the others I've talked to, I sent out a survey to all the Connecticut towns, town managers. I received about 8 or 9 suggestions of ones they've used, sometimes for their own staff leadership type trainings, which is different than a council retreat a little bit. Some that have maybe not done exactly what we're looking for, but said, we use this firm. I think the one I'm talking to tomorrow worked with South Windsor and Greenwich in the past on, goal setting and most of these consultants have a variety of things they can do diversity training for you. They do other things too, but they're going to be those kind of people that kind of draw out of you, make sure everyone's kind of participating and contributing and feeling like they, that all of us have kind of a role to play in setting the goals, most specifically the council.
So is it fair to then set the goal of this meeting and say we would hope that you could identify 1 or 2 that would be reasonable ones for us to consider, or do we give you the ability to select one and come back to us and say?
My recommendation would be, let me try to get you hopefully 2 or 3, and if there's one that just seems head and shoulders above and the price seems reasonable, I would want to do maybe one of these quickly with them on a Zoom call so you could get comfortable with them and see if that looks like somebody you'd want to be the facilitator. This is your,
Okay.
First and foremost, it's your goals and objective, or it's your goals setting exercise. And so I think most important to me is that you're comfortable with, or at least the 3 of you are comfortable with So,
We're just curious, what's a reasonable price for a facilitator anyway? I'm not even sure.
I think it's, again, in normal times. Now, I would say, for instance, this what I would call the sort of platinum model is probably the high end of what you would do, and this would include. And again, this is not what I'm saying we're going to do. You could, for instance, this was a 2-day retreat, which means that person's coming in, they're staying over. Usually, what they do is like a Friday afternoon, a whole day with just the council and the manager, where they're doing roles and roles on the council, role relationships with the manager, and the next day involves a full day of goal setting and department heads and all that. So that would be what I would call the largest you would ever consider doing, and that's like a $15,000 all-in thing. I think now you could say if you're doing that every 2 years, maybe that's $7,500 kind of well spent each year, if you will, because you're doing it every 2 years. And that's why some of these cities and towns do that. I think for half or for less than half, I'd like to think you could get somebody for a day to facilitate, and maybe even less than that. Again, I think that's just the order of magnitude, but I think in the $2,000 to $3,000 to $4,000 range, depending on the expectation and the work product. Are they expected to? What I sent here was, this person has a team that then produces a document that they publish and they release to the press and everyone and say, this is what town came up with, or is it more like what we do, in which case we could create that document ourselves? So that's going to really inform the price. For sure.
Okay. So I'm sensing that the agreement of you two is to let Sean pursue this, and then whenever you have the information that we need to discuss, we can set up another Zoom meeting like this, or an in-person meeting if we're doing it, to try and review those choices and the dates that possibly would work, and so on and so forth. Is that the consensus here?
Yep.
Your consensus, Peter? So
Yes.
it's sort of in your court to try and figure that out. But I think that I agree that that's the level that we're looking for. I think we ought to lobby to have this event in some very exotic location. We could, but I think it should be in an independent location or on Zoom. If somebody's coming in, it should be out of the town hall and out in like at the chamber conference room, or at the, I don't know, country club meeting room, or some board room at a company, so that we're out of the environment of the town hall, and just keep it separate from whatever. But I think that's where we're at. So if we agree with that, we'll give you that goal and objective. How's that? Is that good?
That works for me.
Okay.
And make it a priority.
And make it a priority. That's one of the top priorities, right? So we'll try and get on track, but I think all of the ideas are good, and I'm glad you gave us those proposals, though, because that did give us an overview of, as you say, the Cadillac version, and that gives us some thought to look ahead. Now, do we have anything that we need to go into executive session with about negotiations? You've been so patient, Lou, to sit there all this time. Is there anything that we need to discuss in executive session now?
One's got a, something we could put up, but we should go into executive.
Okay, so we should go in. So then I need a motion to do that.
I'll move we go into executive session to include everyone currently on the Zoom.
Okay. And
I
Don?
second.
All right.
Second.
All right, we all agree? Yes. So let us know when we're at that spot.